Disney is having a rough time, and as their troubles escalate, more and more people are wondering, can they turn it around? Will Disney Plus become profitable? Will they have to sell off assets? Have we already seen the last MCU movie? One possible solution to their problems would be to get sold to another, larger company. This buyer would be able to tend to the financial problems facing the company, as well as providing the impetus for change and restructuring that the company needs. Now, there aren't that many companies with that kind of money lying around, and given the company's past connection with Pixar, a lot of people are looking to Apple as the possible savior of Disney. I am less hopeful of that possibility, and here are 6 reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. Let me ask you a question. What is the largest company that Apple has ever bought? You're probably coming up short because Apple doesn't really famously buy a lot of companies to begin with. Facebook buys companies, Google buys companies, Amazon, Microsoft, those are the kinds of companies in Silicon Valley that make very large acquisitions. But the largest acquisition that Apple has ever made was Beats by Dre in 2014 for $3.2 billion. Now, Disney being worth conservatively $150 billion would make it more than 35 times larger than the largest acquisition Apple has ever made, and one of the largest corporate acquisitions in world history. Now, Beats Headphones was a successful company that Apple bought to round out their own offerings, and Disney, on the other hand, has big structural and operating problems that need to be addressed, which is a problem because Silicon Valley doesn't work this way. Companies in Silicon Valley don't buy failing companies and turn them around. What they do is buy companies that either could be a competitor, like when Facebook bought Instagram, or they have some kind of specific product or expertise or something new that can be leveraged by the larger company. Like when Microsoft bought, I don't know, like everything Microsoft has ever bought. Now, fixing Disney isn't a matter of refinancing debt or just pumping some money into operations. They're going to have to make some big changes in the way the company operates, and there's no reason to think that Apple will be good at that because Apple isn't a turnaround artist. I'm not making a dig at Apple, I'm just stating a fact. This kind of turnaround is going to require people with some very specific skills at understanding how other companies and industries work, and do you think Apple has a ton of those people on staff? No, why would they? We already mentioned this. Apple isn't a company that goes around acquiring corporations and building empires that way. They're a company that sees what other people are doing and then comes up with their own refined, better version of it to great fanfare on their own. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. And you know what they're not good at? Running a company like Disney. Apple should have no idea how to run a company like Disney. Disney owns and operates theme parks and cruise lines and TV networks and massive entertainment production operations, which isn't anything like what Apple does. Now, I know what you're going to say. What about Apple TV Plus? Well, okay, yeah, Apple TV Plus exists, and it's a thing that is a small fraction of what Disney does, and it puts out a weird little hodgepodge of streaming shows and occasionally throws a big pile of money at a major Hollywood director to make them a movie at a loss. And they do this so well that a few years ago they won the Academy Award for Best Picture. But you can't remember the name of that movie, can you? It's okay, I had to look it up while editing this. The point is that Apple running Disney would be like saying, oh, you guys do such a good job at running your Apple stores, maybe you should be put in charge of Disney World. But let's be fair, I'm probably talking too much about what Apple isn't good at doing, and we should talk about what it is good at doing, that whole ecosystem or walled garden thing that they do, because bringing Disney into the fold of that will only enhance their profitability, right? Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's not how the walled garden works. People seem to think that Apple will take Disney's holdings and bundle them with their existing products for some kind of synergy. You buy an iPhone, and then you get a few free months of Disney Plus, and then you keep the subscription, and Apple will make the profit that way. The problem with the walled garden is it doesn't work by bundling things together, it works by excluding. That's why the garden has a wall around it. Again, I'm not taking a dig at Apple, I'm making this entire video on a Mac Mini, I'll have you know. But let's face facts, Apple builds their walled garden by making it difficult for people to use their products unless they buy the Apple hardware. Don't believe me? Well, let's just take a look at how the Apple Notes app works on an Android phone. Maybe I misspelled it. Well, if there's no notes, maybe I could just watch Apple TV Plus on my phone. Browser. The only thing more disappointing than the browser UI are the later seasons of Ted Lasso. Now, we've all heard about that whole blue-green text bubble nonsense, right? If someone in your Apple Messages group chat isn't part of the Apple walled garden, they get marked off as some kind of loser, and the chat functionality starts to break down. It's such a big deal with the young people that 87% of teenagers with a cell phone opt for Apple. Apple's just announced the adoption of new messaging capability, which should give people the ability to stop feeling excluded from the group messages, but they're not doing it for their customers. They're doing it to avoid accusations of anti-competitive behavior, which brings us to this last point. Now, a lot of people forget it because it was the sort of boring part of the story after all the exciting headlines of Disney to buy Fox, but there were actually some pretty lengthy hoops that they had to jump through to pass regulatory compliance to make sure that they could buy Fox a few years ago. See, the government is generally pretty nervous when one big company in an industry buys another big company in the same industry, because at some point they get so big that they can just call the shots for the industry as a whole. Media consolidation is also controversial because you end up owning things like TV news networks. So you can only imagine the colossal headaches waiting over the horizon for Apple, a company already trying to pull back from concerns that it's behaving unfairly in its own industry, trying to purchase Disney, a behemoth in its own super sensitive industry. And the risk, if that deal falls apart, if the government ends up giving Apple a very public black eye, and maybe while they're at it, dragging them through the mud about their own anti-competitive tactics in the past, well, that's just going to be icing on the cake. So, sorry everybody, I know we were hoping for some kind of Deus Ex Machina that could descend from the heavens and set everything right with Disney, but I just don't see those reforms coming from Cupertino anytime soon. So how could Disney get fixed? Well, I do have a few thoughts on that.